February 1944. Vice Admiral Masami Kobayashi stood in the operations center at Truk Lagoon, reviewing convoy schedules with the absolute confidence of a man who commanded Japan's most fortified naval stronghold in the Pacific. The combined fleet's planners had dismissed American submarine activity around the Caroline Islands as manageable harassment, minor losses against the Empire's shipping capacity. Intelligence reports estimated fewer than a dozen American submarines operating in the region, their torpedo reliability still questionable after 2 years of documented failures. The math seemed simple. Truk's protected anchorage, anti-submarine patrols, and the sheer volume of shipping traffic moving through the Central Pacific made interdiction a statistical impossibility. American submarines might pick off isolated merchantmen, but they couldn't seriously threaten the 400-plus vessels cycling through Truk's supply network monthly. Kobayashi had every reason to believe the convoy system was working. He was about to discover that Commander Samuel Dealey aboard USS Harder and a wolf pack of American submarines had already rewritten the calculus. The Japanese confidence wasn't irrational fantasy. Truk Lagoon represented the most sophisticated forward logistics base in the Pacific, a natural fortress surrounded by barrier reefs with 5 deep-water channels, protected anchorage for 350 ships simultaneously, and shore-based anti-submarine assets that had sunk or damaged 17 American submarines since 1942. Japan's Naval General Staff classified the atoll as practically invulnerable to submarine attack, a judgment supported by convoy loss rates holding steady at approximately 3% through late 1943. American submarine doctrine still emphasized surface attacks against isolated targets, exactly the kind of predictable behavior Japanese escorts could counter. Even the feared Mark 14 torpedo had become something of a joke in Tokyo. Reliable intelligence indicated that up to 60% failed to detonate through mid-1943, a technical catastrophe that Japanese anti-submarine commanders exploited mercilessly. When convoys departed Truk for Rabaul, Saipan, and the Marshall Islands in early February 1944, their commanders expected routine passage. The Americans had different plans, and this time their torpedoes worked. February 16th, 0347 hours. Lieutenant Richard O'Kane crouched in USS Tong's conning tower 17 miles northeast of Truk's North Pass, watching a 9-ship convoy materialize through the periscope's night lens. The merchantmen steamed in 3 columns, escorts flanking, every vessel showing lights in apparent confidence that submarine detection equipment would provide adequate warning. O'Kane counted 3 destroyers, 2 submarine chasers, 7 cargo vessels displacing between 6,000 and 10,000 tons, a target package representing roughly 60,000 tons of shipping that Japan's merchant marine could no longer afford to lose. O'Kane maneuvered Tong into firing position, the submarine's new Mark 18 electric torpedoes already loaded, their wakeless approach eliminating the telltale phosphorescent trails that had betrayed earlier attacks. At 0419 hours, Tong fired 6 torpedoes in a carefully staggered spread targeting the convoy's center column. 4 struck home. The 7,200-ton cargo vessel Fukwei Maru disintegrated in a fuel explosion visible from 15 miles, her back broken, aviation gasoline cargo turning the sea into a roaring lake of fire. Neighboring merchantman Ryusei Maru took 2 torpedoes amidships, capsizing in 90 seconds with 1,100 tons of artillery shells and spare aircraft engines. The convoy dissolved into chaos, escorts racing toward empty water while Tong slipped beneath a thermal layer, hydrophone operators listening to the methodical breakup of steel hulls imploding under crushing pressure. Japanese destroyer Maikaze charged past Tong's position, depth charges detonating 300 yards astern, close enough to jar loose deck plating, but nowhere near the actual submarine. O'Kane brought Tong to periscope depth 40 minutes later. 5 miles north, Fukwei Maru's burning oil slick still blazed, and the convoy had scattered into individual ships running independently for Truk's defensive perimeter. The escort doctrine had collapsed on first contact. 300 miles west, Commander Dudley Morton aboard USS Wahoo was simultaneously dismantling the southbound convoy from Saipan. Morton had pioneered aggressive pack tactics, coordinated attacks by multiple submarines converging from different bearings to overwhelm escorts. At 06:15 hours, February 16th, Wahoo struck convoy HI-32's port flank while USS Sunfish hit starboard, firing 17 torpedoes in a synchronized assault that left Japanese commanders unable to determine submarine positions or numbers. The 9,500-ton transport Shunsen Maru took 4 torpedo hits, breaking in half with 2,400 troops of the 52nd Division still below decks. Survivors reported hearing the screaming through bulkheads as compartments flooded, soldiers trapped behind watertight doors that damage control parties never reached. Sunfish put 3 torpedoes into Hoyo Maru, 10,000 tons of crude oil and aviation fuel erupting in a fireball that registered on seismic monitors in Guam. The convoy's destroyer screen counterattacked empty ocean coordinates while both American submarines withdrew on silent running, hydrophones tracking the escort's increasingly frantic sonar pings, sweeping sectors the submarines had already vacated. By 0800 hours, convoy HI-32 had lost 4 ships totaling 31,000 tons. The survivors limped into Truk with deck guns manned and crews scanning for periscope feathers that never appeared. Japanese naval intelligence began revising their submarine estimates upward. They were still counting too low. The Wolfpack had only started. Between February 16 and February 23, 1944, 12 American submarines operating in coordinated groups transformed the waters around Truk from protected shipping lanes into a killing field the Japanese merchant captains began calling the Death Zone. USS Harder, Tang, Sunfish, Aspro, and 8 others struck 27 separate convoys, sinking 41 merchantmen and auxiliaries, totaling 237,000 tons, more shipping than Japan's entire shipbuilding capacity could replace in 4 months. Commander Dealey aboard Harder became particularly lethal, developing a tactic of penetrating escort screens by deliberately moving toward attacking destroyers, then diving beneath them to fire torpedoes up into their hulls at point-blank range. On February 19, Harder sank destroyer Izanami with 3 torpedoes fired from 900 yards while the destroyer was actively depth-charging Harder's projected position. The Japanese anti-submarine doctrine assumed submarines fled from destroyers. Dealey attacked them. Between February 16 and April 1944, Harder sank 5 destroyers, vessels Japan desperately needed for convoy escort duty, using this aggressive reversal of expected submarine behavior. Every tactical assumption in the Japanese playbook was being systematically invalidated. Vice Admiral Kobayashi's confidence transformed into panic by February 21st, when loss reports consolidated into a devastating pattern. 41 vessels sunk or damaged in 6 days. Convoy schedules collapsing as merchant captains refused to sail without massive destroyer escorts that no longer existed in sufficient numbers. The submarines weren't harassing shipping, they were conducting systematic interdiction, targeting specific convoy routes, coordinating attacks, and exploiting the fatal Japanese assumption that American torpedoes still didn't work reliably. They worked perfectly now. The Mark 18 electric torpedo's wakeless approach, combined with improved depth-keeping mechanisms and magnetic contact dual fusing systems, created a weapon that struck without warning and detonated with near-perfect reliability. Japanese post-action reports cataloged the horror in bureaucratic language. Torpedo performance indicates major technical improvements, current countermeasures ineffective, convoy operations no longer sustainable without fundamental tactical revision. Truk's status as an impregnable logistics hub evaporated in 1 week. By February 23rd, the Naval General Staff had ordered Truk's partial evacuation, withdrawing major combatant vessels to Palau and the Philippines. The submarines had accomplished what carrier raids and strategic bombing had not.
They'd made Japan's forward logistics network untenable through sheer attrition mathematics. Shipping losses around Truk in February 1944 exceeded Japan's total monthly tanker construction capacity. The oil stopped flowing. The military materials stopped moving. The empire began to starve. The final accounting proved catastrophic beyond tactical defeat. Between January and June 1944, American submarines sank 612,000 tons of Japanese shipping in the Central Pacific Theater, with 237,000 tons directly attributable to operations around Truk. Japan's merchant marine, which had peaked at 6.4 million tons in 1942, fell below 4 million tons by summer 1944. Losses outpacing replacement construction by margins that made strategic defeat inevitable. The submarines targeting Truk hadn't just sunk ships, they'd severed the logistical arteries feeding Japan's defensive perimeter. Intercepted Japanese communications revealed the psychological impact. Destroyer captains refusing to escort convoys without air cover that no longer existed. Merchant crews deserting rather than sail routes they called submarine alleys. Naval planners contemplating abandoning entire island garrisons because resupply had become mathematically impossible. Vice Admiral Kobayashi's February dismissal barely registered in the cascade of institutional failures. The empire had built its Pacific strategy on forward logistics hubs protected by naval superiority and assumed submarine ineffectiveness. The Americans had systematically destroyed both assumptions. By April 1944, Truk, once called the Gibraltar of the Pacific, sat abandoned, its anchorage empty, its supply depots evacuated, rendered useless by an enemy that Japan's intelligence apparatus had consistently underestimated. 41 ships destroyed in 6 days. The submarines had spoken, and the ocean had listened.
Those 41 merchantmen represented more than steel and cargo. They carried aviation fuel that never reached airfields, artillery shells that never fired, reinforcements that never arrived. The submarines choking Truk proved that underestimating your enemy's ability to adapt, to improve, to coordinate doesn't just cost you battles, it costs you entire theaters. If these stories of arrogance meeting brutal reality resonate with you, subscribe for the next deep dive into World War II's most devastating miscalculations.